Season 4, Meeting Underground, Episode 2. We're going to talk about the music of Murfreesboro today, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is a companion video to the Hope Project number 8, which we just released, and you've seen it. If you've watched our stuff, you've seen it. So this is the companion video to it. We're going to go into more depth about the things that were mentioned and the musicians and artists that were mentioned and the city that was mentioned. So this is that. We thank you, Marie. Appreciate you joining us. First of all, when we went into this episode of the project, going into Murfreesboro, it was different than anything we've done.
Yeah.
First of all, we simply researched things about the city, researched things about, and found this stuff about the musical influences, and we chose the 3 main musical influences that we came across. And we had when we went there, we had no place to go. I mean, we talked about Dave MACON, we talked about the Holloway High School Quartet, and we talked about Sponge Bath, and none of them were there. So it was our experience of going and discovering. So it was like we were kind of discovering these places.
Yeah.
And so it put a little different light on it. We went, and it was pretty enlightening.
Yeah, it turned out good.
So this show will be a little different, but beginning with Murfreesboro, had a big history through the Civil War and through one thing. Its location is the center of the state of Tennessee.
Yeah, which I didn't realize that.
It's right in the center. And it actually was the state capital of Tennessee for a short time, and then Nashville. But before the Civil War and after the Civil War, Murfreesboro's whole economy and everything was changed. Before the Civil War, it was a very fertile agricultural area.
Yeah.
And it had there were plantations and things like that ran the thing. But as it came up to the Civil War, the northern troops came in and occupied the area because of the fertile ground and land, and they lived off it and pretty much ended up stripping the land because of the war and all of the stuff that took place. But also there was a major battle in Murfreesboro called the Stones River Battle.
Oh yeah.
And it was significant, and there was 24,000 people that died in it. And
in like 3 days or something.
It was just the end December last day. It was on New Year's Eve. It started or something, and it went to January 2nd or something. Yeah. 24,000 people died. It also was the battle that gave Lincoln a victory so he could declare the Emancipation Proclamation. Mm-hmm. So it significantly influenced that in the war. Yeah. It was the first significant victory that the North had in a while.
Yeah. But, it was a key event to bring that.
Yeah. So it's funny, I was thinking, did you see, I was telling Jonnie, it's like when we left, when we were driving away after our shoot, this is the mall that was there. We're driving away, we go right by, it's the Stones River Mall, and so...
Yeah, I never knew, I've seen that before, I never realized what that was a reference to.
It's so funny, because we were doing this research and looking at the war and stuff, and now there's a mall named after the back of the place.
A horrible battle it took place.
So let's go into, like, standing at that level of it, our experiences of going there. Is there any thoughts you have? Any random thoughts about just the city and how we went there and what it was? The weather. So just maybe any thoughts or insights to our experience of going to Murfreesboro at the beginning.
Yeah, this one was a little different because it was kind of reverse engineered. Like, we chose the location and then dove in, and it was cool to find out some of the history, all the stuff that we didn't have any idea. Stuff. It wasn't, like the other trips have been, but it was cool to kind of see some of those landmarks and stuff and kind of realize the importance of some of these things along the way instead of already knowing about it ahead of time.
Yeah.
But was definitely hot. It's a hot
It
weekend.
was probably the hottest weekend of the year so far.
Yeah.
And we did live music out in the sun. And,
Perfect combination.
It was great. The video has already been out, so it's the video that's along with the whole project number 8.
I'm glad we got it. I couldn't go another song.
It was pretty hot. We were working through it.
That was a cool spot.
Yeah.
Speaking of that performance part, that was cool.
Yeah. Now, when we were looking into Murfreesboro, we found 3 significant people or musical entities that framed Nashville. I mean, not Murfreesboro.
Yeah.
Not Nashville. One of them was Uncle David Macon.
Well, the train pulled on to the very next stop. I looked around about 17 cops. Across the hill, you ought to seen me run. Bang a bang a bang a with my Gatling gun. Taking me back, taking me back, taking me back, taking me back, taking me back to my old Carolina home. Oh yeah, taking me back, taking me back.
And so Uncle David Macon is some character. Anybody want to jump in?
Well, I mean, what we know, or what the first things you learn about him would be, he's known for his banjo playing and for his presence as like a, comedian on stage. Yeah.
Significant foundational musician in American history.
The comedic side of him is interesting too. Definitely plays into his
He's
character.
showy in a fun way. I mean, there's some really funny stories.
A bit eccentric.
I've heard about.
You saw that in the video.
Yeah.
Pete Seeger. He said that Uncle David Macon was a foundational character in American music.
Yeah, I just didn't realize. I feel like I had maybe heard his name, like especially living around this area. I had no idea how influential he was with banjo playing in general. Like he's.
They said he kind of iconic. He bridged the vaudeville folk music scene with the phonograph radio listening scene, and he was there at that conjuncture of music turning. And he was the first star of the WSM Grand Ole Opry. He was the first star of Grand Ole Opry when it was first founded. And that would have been in the 20s.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. I was listening to, there's an author that wrote a book about the guy. Now, you'll go and you look up Uncle Dave Macon. You can find videos of him singing, like you've seen a little bit of, and you can find all kinds of stuff, people talking about him. But this was all about his professional career. He was 50 years old before he even started music.
Yeah.
Really?
He had been playing, but he was 50 years old when he started
actually
doing it professionally, going out to play. And he had a rough life before 50. Do you know some of the details?
Well, I was just going to say that it's an interesting story, too, of him getting started. It was that he had that one sister that was the primary influence for him.
And his whole family.
And she was a musician, and she was the one family member that really kind of encouraged him.
His sister really was the one that said, no, you need to do this.
Yeah, and that was even in spite of, who else was it? Somebody.
His family members. There were not a lot of support for what he did.
But it was, I mean, he's 50. He already was a farmer. Like, he has a farm. Yeah. And then he would just, once he got going with his career, would like leave, go do music, and then come back and start working the farm again. Like, that was just how he did things.
Yeah. Well, before he was 50, he came from a family himself of 11 kids.
Wow.
He was one of 11 kids, and he himself had 7 kids when he launched his career to be this traveling comedian, banjo player. Yeah. And before he even started his career, he struggled with alcoholism. He was institutionalized 3 times.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
At the state hospital in Nashville
for depression.
And related into the issues of drinking and stuff like that.
Yeah, that certainly didn't help.
But when he was 35 years old, out of the 11 brothers and sisters he had, half of them were dead.
Yep.
Wow. And he was 35. Half. So that means 5 or 6 of them died before he was even, he was only 35. Yeah. That's how shows you how rough
that is a rough life.
It's pretty rough, and they were farmers and stuff. So tough life. His dad was murdered on Broadway.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't see that.
He was I think he was mugged and murdered on Broadway, which doesn't. It's kind of similar to these days.
Yeah.
It says something about him that he can go through all that and then end up doing comedic
and it's all
entertainment.
Fun, yeah, funny and
wow.
Plus, his style of banjo playing is noted by people that are banjo players.
Yeah, for sure.
Murfreesboro, before and after the war, there's no hiding the fact this is a central southern county and southern state.
Yeah.
Which pre-Civil War to post-Civil War, there were plantations everywhere. Yeah. There was a lot of it was a deep seed of the South, and the war changed that.
Over time, yeah.
And actually Murfreesboro changed from being a agricultural place supported much by plantations and the slavery that was going on.
Yeah.
When after the war, the slavery ended, the occupation of the town of the area ended, and the area was depleted completely. Yeah. And so it came back decades later as a industrial and manufacturing area.
Yeah.
But it never returned to the kind of agricultural stuff. So the effect of, we're talking about people that lived in this time. And so Macon.
Yeah, Macon was a man of his time. And
first talk culture. About, by all people that talk about him say that he was a very nice guy. He was he was a faith-oriented guy. He cared about people, mostly not for, and he was involved with helping people, but not as much politically as it was the fact that as a Bible believer, he believed that it was wrong to do injustice to people around him. So in the middle of all this stuff, he still was, that's where his heart was.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So explain who Homie Jenkins is and the story.
I don't remember how long ago. It's a fairly recent
2019.
Yeah, it's a fairly recent video.
There's a video we found, guy's named Hubby Jenkins.
Yeah.
He's a black banjo player, got long dreads, real nice guy, but he did a video and he was talking about it.
From the stage, was talking about, that video was my introduction to Uncle Dave Macon. Him talking about this old white dude from the 20s who was a fantastic, banjo player, and he said that he would tell the story about him, but then also just say, I just love this guy's music. But he would tell the story that he was a Bible toting Christian, and so
a sensitive one too, and one that cared about people and tried not to hurt people's feelings, tried to behave like, and yet.
Yeah, so he would watch his language, like wouldn't say, he would say heck or darn or stuff like that on stage, but then like Hubby Jenkins says, he'd be dropping N-bombs all over the place because that was just and I think what you said, he actually paused and said he said he was definitely a man of his time.
Yeah,
it's like
he was a product of the culture at the time, and there was a lot of racist.
He's even got that
behavior,
song names and stuff
but also the language, the N-word language stuff wasn't. It's what it was at the time.
It was a cultural thing, but it also played out in his actions that wasn't
a hateful thing.
Because of how he made sure to take care of there were specific stories they would tell of him when they were performing or traveling or whatever, of taking care of his black friend musicians that were performing with him. He would make sure that he would bring them out food and make sure that they were taken care of, treated as equals. At heart, even being a man of the time and it was progressive.
So this Hubby Jenkins, there's a video out. You can look him up and find it. It's 2019. He was actually doing a performance, and he was talking to the audience and telling them about this character, David Macon, because he was going to play one of David Macon's songs.
Right.
And he was explaining how influential this banjo player was, and he was telling all this stuff. And he said, I just love David Macon. So it was kind of nice to hear from someone who would have a perspective as a black man of this guy, but
looking at it from the outside, you can make assumptions. But it sounds like he was.
But he was a fascinating character. He was the first superstar of the Grand Ole Opry back in the late 20s. He was considered one of the 2 or 3 founding people that were involved with WSM Grand Ole Opry, which everybody knows the extent of that reach and what it, and even to today.
Yeah.
So when we went there,
Mhm.
our only contact with this man and who he was we heard that we knew where his gravestone was.
Right. Yeah.
So anybody want to talk about that?
Which, and we get into that area, and suddenly the roads, it's like making this, and so
Yeah.
his family. I mean, we already talked about the size of his
I
family.
mean, we're driving out quite a bit into the boonies,
Yeah,
like way out
yeah,
into
we're
the
getting out
outer.
into farmland
And-
stuff. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we're noticing the names of the streets and places like that, and it all has
The bridge. Yeah.
bridge. There's a bridge called the Macon Bridge, and
Yeah.
and we found we found the cemetery,
Yeah.
and so it's just a small, quaint,
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
old cemetery, and fortunately, we met some people there that steered us in the right direction. They were
Yeah.
there. And anybody want to talk about that?
Which we should have expected
Yeah.
in that area, and of course he had a large family that lived and potentially still
Probably. Yeah.
lives in the area. It wasn't a huge surprise that his gravestone was one of the largest and most well
Very
kept,
nice.
Yeah.
Had a
and
bench.
even had a matching granite or whatever
a bench
right
thing
next
that was
to
like
it.
and we'll show video of all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was interesting to go see that
was.
because not knowing a ton about him, but then
Because none of this
Also,
stuff we're
just
talking,
having
we didn't
it-
know hardly anything about it.
Right.
yeah,
We were just like skimming it, and
This
we
was
went
a-
there to discover this.
Yeah, it was a voyage of
So
discovery.
our trip was
for us.
discovering these things, and
Yeah.
it was kind of
it
cool.
was cool.
But even outside of his gravestone, being a small town,
Yeah,
it was
I
very
know.
interesting. Like some of those gravestones were, I mean, they went way back.
that one you guys.
There was that one that was so
Yeah.
old that the fenced-in area to protect it was already old. Like they brought iron
That was-
fence.
How,
everything
it was
all
like it was
worn
a
down.
young kid or something.
Yeah, there was a lot.
Young-
There were some
young
of the,
person.
some of the oldest graves I think I've ever personally
What was the date on
seen.
that?
I don't remember.
It
but
was like
I definitely
17.
took pictures. and
Yeah,
we
it was
could
a
show
long
some of
time
that.
ago.
Yeah, there were some of those that went into the
Yeah.
mid to late 1880s on into the
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was fun,
Yeah.
and we also
Cool.
found where he lived.
Yeah, we figured out he lived like right down the road from
from
the cemetery.
that-
With nothing much to see.
We could
People were living in the house, and it didn't really look as old as me as it was.
Right.
Yeah, it was a little overgrown and stuff, but it was still cool to see.
Yeah.
Where
So,
he actually lived.
That was fun, and it was part of the whole discovery, and that was David Macon, and so
Yeah.
that was part one.
David play on your harp, hallelujah. Does David play on your harp, hallelujah. Does David play on your harp, hallelujah. Does David play on your harp, hallelujah. Down in the valley, oh Lord, I didn't want to stay.
So the second group that we found, that we heard about, that was highly influential and from Murfreesboro, was a group called the Holloway High School Quartet. And we heard they were known in the early 40s and around the time of the beginning of the war. They were known nationwide, and they were from Murfreesboro. So we kind of started looking into that and try to find some of that. And we went to their school.
To the school.
Same thing. We first of all, finding out that there was still a school was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Because this is talking about the 40s, and there really was a school. So we mapped it out, went there and shot, and you'll see these footage. We went to the place and we went and saw it, and we talked to a woman. What was her name? Eleanor Sanders. Was it Eleanor?
It's not. I don't think it was Eleanor. We had to remember.
Yeah, we did.
memorize
It
this.
was something
Elaine Sanders or
Yeah.
something. It was this old black woman, and she drove up, and we went over and talked to her, and she was just fascinated. I was telling her why we were at their school, and why we were doing this, and we said, we're just here to shoot footage of this, to document this singing group, the Holloway High School Quartet that came from this high school. She goes, and she said she went to this high school 30 years ago, but she'd never heard of this quartet. So
They were like
they were known nationwide
just
just before the Second World War, or
Yeah.
at the beginning of the Second World War.
Yeah.
So it was
Cool
interesting.
stuff.
Yeah, it was really cool. And then we found this footage. We traced them down. The names of the guys were this. First of all, they said they were from that high school, but by the sound of their voices, because they sound like full-grown men.
They do.
Yeah, they do.
And
sure, that's what shocked me.
so they're saying that the story is probably that they all was from that high school, but they might have done it like when they were 19 or 20 or a little bit older, that they recorded this stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
How their music got known was related to this guy named John W. Work III.
Mm.
He was a professor of music at Fisk and went on to what ended up being Juilliard.
Yeah.
He was very
Pretty
accomplished
yeah.
composer, a black man at the time. Interesting how he really was very influential, and
Yeah.
he became part of You've heard of these stories where a lot of the black music was gathered and recorded for first time to enter it into the Library of Congress to become part of the American history.
Yeah.
And I think it was the Archive of American Folk Song. That was the group that worked with the Library of Congress. Most people credit this guy named Alan Lomax, who was this blues folk singer, but he was a white guy, and he took it on himself to work with the Library of the Congress, and they started recording unknown blues players and gospel singers.
Yeah.
And
It's really cool stuff.
so Lomax is the one credited, but John Work actually started to work with them, and in the region of where we're at, he did a lot of stuff.
A lot. Yeah.
And John Work himself was the one credited that he actually was the first person to record Muddy Waters.
Yeah, which is huge.
And that's usually the story I hear. Muddy Waters was originally discovered by this Library of Congress thing where they went out recording people and stuff. But so John Work III was the one that worked in this area about that, and he worked on that from like 1939 to 41 or something like that.
40s, yeah.
And then he's the one that found Holloway High School Quartet.
Yeah.
And so any recordings that we have access to listen to are most, if not all, the
And you-
recordings he set up and
Through
did.
John, yeah.
You're right, yeah.
And they were known nationwide. They were known everywhere,
Cool stuff.
and they were just a singing gospel group. And it's just really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So we had this country guy, Macon, and we have this gospel singing group,
Yeah.
and these are all simply from Murfreesboro.
Yeah.
And this group from Murfreesboro ended up being known everywhere.
Yeah.
And so we got to go to their high school. We got to do footage. We got to go film, and you see some of that.
Yeah.
It's been a few weeks since we've been to Murfreesboro, but we just found out their names. We traced it down.
Yeah, doing a
We
little
can
research.
go into the show. These are the guys.
4 guys: Warren G. Johnson, Richard Gregory, Zema Richardson, and Anthony Winrow. I guess were the 4.
And those are the 4 guys that were the quartet.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. I love that era of like gospel.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Style is really cool.
We went to this graveyard not knowing what we were going to get.
Yeah.
Cold, and we went to this high school cold. We didn't know anything,
Yeah.
but it just ended up being cool because we kind of like dug up
Yeah.
where these guys are from. People from their own high school never heard of them,
Right.
and we're going, "Well, you're documenting them." It was pretty cool. So it was kind of a highlight to me of the trip.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat. You know, we've had these interactions with locals on maybe every one of these trips.
Every trip.
But even on this one, just at our, the hotel we stayed at, which was, it was just the lady that checked us in. And we had said that, what we were, in town for. And when we were leaving, we were finishing up on our second day, and I was dropping the keys off, and she asked about the project, and so I gave her details. And you've had more than one of these interactions, but just telling her, we're here looking at this and this and this, that is music history from your area, where you live, and she just got really excited about
this whole project idea. Is people love it. I was like, I like the day before we took off to go to Murfreesboro. I was at a bank. I was cashing a check. I was talking to him, and this guy says, "So, are you gonna have a good? What are you doing this weekend? Are you gonna have fun?" I said, "Well, by the way, I am going to have a good one." And I said, "We're going to this town, Murfreesboro. We're out there to." And I told him what we were doing. And this whole project is a 25 city busking tour where we go and play there, but we just simply feature the town, and I told them what we were doing, and him and this person that was taking care of me, they just got in this big old conversation. They thought it was so cool.
Yeah.
Says, so how many? I said, this will be our number. This will be 8. This was the 8th one, and they just were fast. People love this idea.
Yeah.
We're just going to go to the town and feature the town.
Yeah.
We're going to highlight cool stuff about this area that people don't know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and also help culturally for us to appreciate one another.
Mm-hmm.
In these towns, there's so much negativity today and about things
Yeah.
that it's nice to go and say, okay, we're going to go feature this little town. We're going to talk about it. We're going to also focus on nonprofits that can help. You can help support the communities there. But it's just a great idea.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun doing these, and this one is no different.
So the high school quartet thing, it kind of come full circle, and now we got to hear what they sounded like.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know when we chose Murfreesboro, there was like one bit of music history there that we did
know.
And it was kind of the leading force. We were like, well, if there's nothing else, we can at least focus on this. And that was all of Sponge Bath Records.
Right.
Yeah.
I was pretty young. I mean...
So this is back, what, mid-90s?
Well, and that's the thing too. Sponge Bath Records. All of this has happened in the time since we've moved to Tennessee.
Yeah.
Like it headed into its peak, right in the first couple of years after.
For those not familiar, Sponge Bath Records was this. All of a sudden, it just popped out as nowhere, and it was known nationwide, and a
lot of guys out of MTSU.
So a lot
of college kids that were in bands.
Mm-hmm.
You had the band Self. They had the band Fluid Ounces, the Cadies, the Features, and this Count Bass D. Those are some of the main guys.
Good stuff.
And so when we moved to Dixon,
And
how did we hear? Like for me, I remember going and seeing Self. I remember going seeing Self and the Cadies, and I don't remember. It was at the riverfront or something.
Yeah.
And so we heard about this music, and
I'm trying to remember when my introduction to it might very well have been the group of friends I kind of joined at Dixon High.
Yeah.
And because I mean it was coming out of Murfreesboro, and they even kind of, I mean, it became, even though it was in Murfreesboro, it kind of became the Nashville sound as far as
and it wasn't
like
indie music and
and rock oriented and rock pop, that kind of there wasn't. This was before like Jack White came and before the Black Keys, before the rock influences, the Kings of Leon.
I'm sure Kings of Leon and them were probably around,
but they weren't in Nashville.
They were much.
No, they might have been. They're from.
They might have been around, but they were.
But Sponge Bath brought this attention to where if you thought of Nashville, the rock element, the rock pop element, indie element of Nashville was Sponge Bath.
Right, something other than country for Nashville to be known by. Sponge Bath Records, I mean, it came on strong.
And they were
a lot of good
They were on the cover of Billboard magazine. This Self was, and they influenced. A bunch of them. These bands ended up getting signed with major nationwide labels.
The Features went on to do a lot of big things. So did Self.
And we're going to talk a little more about the Features. But the whole thing of them was in mid '90s. They were well known nationwide, worldwide.
Huge for me. Yeah, I was pretty young when
they were great too. The music was cool.
It's very good. It was kind of original.
It was different, and it had a style. Even though like the Cadies were more of a harder rock thing. Self became very well. They were probably the most successful.
I'd say so.
Nationwide, and they went on to do a song on Shrek, the movie Shrek.
The first Shrek movie. Yeah, there's kicks off the credits.
That probably helped their name.
That was, I mean, obviously they'd already been signed to a big label for that, and they relocated to California.
Yeah, they went to California and stuff like that. But originally, just all came out of Murfreesboro.
Yeah.
Now, there's a guy, I wanted to bring this up, we didn't talk about it. There's a guy that was part of the original crew of Sponge Bath who is named Michael Eads.
Oh, yeah.
Michael Eads was part of the staff of the Sponge Bath movement. Now, our connection to him is...
Well, he went on to start and owns YK Records,
which
is also
currently now...
I would kind of say that's
pretty,
the closest thing to what SpongeBob was.
It's all indie music. It's got he signs up really cool bands.
A lot of good stuff.
And in fact, we did a meeting underground completely about YK Records.
A big show they did.
We'll show you right here what episode that was. And so we did this whole thing, and we went to one of their nights where they premiered their bands, and we did video. We shot video, and we did put together a meeting underground with all their bands. It was all about their record label. And Michael Eads sent us thing saying thank you so much.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy.
Really appreciated it.
And we should say that
and then,
our brother's band...
Our brother...
Go ahead, you tell.
No, go ahead.
The Mute Group is...
Yeah, the band Mute
label,
Group,
so.
Which we've talked about a lot. That's their brother, my son, Ryan LaFave. He is the bass player for the band, the Mute Group. Mm-hmm. And nobody that's watched these meeting undergrounds doesn't know who they are. Because we've talked about them and featured them a lot.
But this was full circle.
And that was like the East Nashville bands that we were all a part of back, before the quarantine and all this stuff hit and ruined everything. But we were part of that group and we were supporting one another. This Mute Group is on YK Records.
Yeah. Which is a really cool...
Which is an offshoot.
Familial tie into the subject at hand today.
Yeah,
for sure.
But there's another family connection that we have with other than just going and seeing Self and knowing who they were, and knowing some of these bands. Flute Ounces, really good band. This Count Basie, I don't know a lot about him, but he was part
of
rapper, kind of fun,
which he continues to. He has recorded so much music, but he would, when you get those cool little explosions of a music scene in town, and they all work with each other. So Count Basie would pop up on Self stuff, and they would do stuff.
That's not Count Basie. That's Count Bass D.
Yes,
because everyone knows who Count Basie is. But so anyway, but one of the connections that we personally as a family have had is with the band The Features, who were a premier band of SpongeBob. Yeah. We have... Somebody want to explain our connection with them?
Well, I'd been listening to them, at some point, shortly after we'd moved here from Michigan, I'd been listening to a lot of these bands and would go with friends into Nashville and see their live shows and in a number of different venues. I remember seeing The Features early on where Matt is up on the stage in his rabbit suit playing his trombone, and all that, and then seeing Self, and getting to meet the band, and I still have a pair of drumsticks from the drummer from Self, which is he's one of my favorite drummers. I just always liked his style, and his name's Jason. So,
but one of the go ahead.
But so having gone to a number of these shows, and then there was a particular one that we went. It was a Third and Lindsley show. It was a Mother's Day show, and we took Mom. And
now, to explain, we want to explain a little bit. My wife, Sally, is a really, really good photographer. And she's photographed a lot of music bands. Citizen Cope, she's done a significant amount of work on his work early on.
Yeah.
And then she did lots of other bands and stuff like that. But The Features was one of the bands she connected up with personally, and did a lot of their early photo stuff that was going on when they were first breaking.
And that was
my wife and their mother.
Yeah,
Two Wings Photography, by the way.
Yeah,
it's right here.
But I remember the specific event. We went to that Mother's Day show of The Features, and they were just on it that night. And they got done, and Mom was so in love with their music, she went straight over to the manager and was like, "You guys are awesome. Can I shoot you? Can I do some photos with you?" And that started that interaction, that relationship.
It went on for a few years.
Mom was,
promo
one
shots.
of their official photographers,
yeah.
And so
just had to be surreal for you.
It was very surreal. I'd already been listening to them for years, and then it's like, Mom's going to do pictures of The Features.
The Features.
And then
by the way, The Features are fantastic.
They are,
and
they always have been.
And they're copied now.
Still influential.
They're influential. For listening to them, I heard a little bit coming back of Talking Heads sort of influence, but they took that and they didn't copy that. They took it into a whole thing that now they're the ones everybody's copying that are doing it currently in today's music market.
And they still play. I mean, they still play self and features on Lightning 100 once in a while. Like it's definitely still in the air a bit. Their influence and stuff.
I remember Mom did this shoot with features, and it was at this. I forget where it was, somewhere in Nashville.
Her friend's studio, I think.
Yeah, it was a friend of her studio, and I went there just to be a grunt guy, a gopher to help out.
And so, I did not miss the opportunity to go to that. I was there.
So you were there too.
Yeah.
And so we got to watch them change wardrobe and all that stuff. I kind of got to know Matt a little bit that day. I never really was close. Mom was pretty close to those guys, but I knew them. They knew me by face and name and all that. And but it was real interesting. So we got to go to that first thing, that
studio
shoot
which
that
for me
ended up all that stuff. They ended up using all that material. And Mom, Sally, my wife, basically gave them all of that stuff at no charge and allowed them to use it for promotion. And it was pretty cool.
That experience for me at the studio, like we already discussed, I was already a huge fan and had been for a few years. So to actually, I don't know how many people get to do this, to like sit down with a band that you love and just talk music. So cool. I got to have like discussions with them about music that I liked, that they liked, that hearing influences like you mentioned Talking Heads, but I remember Matt specifically saying, he was a big David Bowie fan, and that
David Bowie would be another one.
Yeah,
it's not like he was a direct, but I noted it was that new wave kind of rock thing that the Talking Heads are doing.
Quirkiness.
Their band. This was after that, so these guys. I could tell he was influenced with, but Matt is incredible. These guys put out some great music, and they ended up getting signed with a big label, and then stuff happened, and they ended up. But they're still around, still influential. I don't know if they're playing right now.
I think they might, as far as I know, they might have stopped a couple years ago. But
well,
they went for a while.
There's one other little 6 degrees of separation thing that happened in this. We talked about YK Records. Well, one of the bands on YK Records is called The Robe.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And when we shot their showcases, we had film of this band, The Robe, and The Robe is a guy named Rollum, and he's in this band, The Robe, that's on YK Records, and he was the drummer from the features.
Yeah.
Another little circle event.
A lot of those guys are still in the scene and in the community.
So it's pretty cool.
And they're great too. His new band's The Robe.
So we're probably going to have to bring this into a close, but that's the three different areas that Murfreesboro represents musically, historically, and personally. And I think that the trip we took was very interesting. It was it was not like the other trips. We didn't have certain things to go see, but we dug it all up, and that kind of set the nature of it.
We did have to, while there weren't like remnants of things to do with Sponge Bath on the walls or at the location, we did make a point of going and seeing a show at the end.
Yeah,
which we went right across from
not the end.
I'm sorry, the Borough. The Borough.
Yeah, the Borough was the hot club. We'll show a little footage of it.
It's right across from the TSU campus.
But the Borough was the place everybody played. That was where all the concerts were.
Of those guys.
All these bands came through. That was where they broke. They cut their teeth there.
Yeah, for sure. It's still there.
It's still there. We went and had dinner there.
Yeah,
and saw a band. They were pretty good.
Yeah. That was probably one of, besides like Cornerstone stuff growing up. I was like 13 years old and I saw the features of the Borough. That was like, I felt like I was growing up. Like I got to go. Cool. So I even have memories of that place.
So that's the music of Murfreesboro. And that's what this episode is about. So that's the music of Murfreesboro. We're going to be moving on. We got some ideas for the future, places we're going to go. One of the places we intend to get back to, getting back to bigger music towns, is we've gone and spent time in Memphis, and we want to do that'll come up sometime, maybe in the fall, maybe in the winter. We're gonna be going there, but we're gonna be continue to do these, and we thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. We're gonna close out the show with a brand new video that we just put out. That was a JAILSONG, which it's just been ran as promotions and stuff, and it's been put out, and it's called Imagination is a Mixed Bag. The video is different. And we are going to close the show out with that. We hope you like it. So next time, we'll see you.
Imagination is a mixed bag. Can't lift you up or be a real drag. Imagination is a mixed bag. Never trusting what you hear, only certain what you fear seems such a real thing. Afraid of things to come, like the beating of a drum can leave a real sting. Hoping for a dream, you can see it right before you like a real thing. So fake it till you make it, never try and complicate it till the bell rings. Imagination is a mixed bag. Imagination is a mixed bag. Can lift you up or be a real drag. Imagination is a mixed bag. Always so suspicious of the ones you know so precious, leaves a dark stain. Never know for certain that what lies beyond their curtain is a good thing. Practice counting stars, always certain whose you are in the big scheme. Faith in every promise, never play the doubting Thomas, it's a real thing. No, it's up to you and me, the truth can be so hard to see, we look for it so intently. Glass half full or half empty, the choice is up to you and me, the truth when known will set you free. It's right there to see. Imagine that. Imagination is a mixed bag. Can lift you up or be a real drag. Imagination is a mixed bag. Imagination is a mixed bag. For a dream you can see. Imagination like a real thing. Can lift you up or be a real drag. Imagination is a mixed bag. Imagination is a mixed bag. Imagination is a mixed bag. Can lift you up or be a